What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, and I'm the publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, and I get to cover the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated over on Fan Nation. It's been an absolute blast. We have a very special episode of the podcast coming to you live from youtube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres. So whether you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if you're tuned in here live, I appreciate you guys taking some time out of your day to talk some Ducks with us. And we have plenty to talk about with a National Signing Day edition here on Wednesday, February 2nd. I'm joined by my good friend, Dylan Reubenking, a.k.a. Rube, as I like to call him. Kind of a running inside joke that we have. Dylan, you are the man of the hour in my book. You know, if you guys aren't following Dylan on Twitter at DRK Sports News, you are missing out on some amazing Duck content. Dylan has been absolutely killing the game for us with graphic design of late, among other things. He hops on these podcasts with me. He edits a ton of stuff, writes a bunch of stuff for us over on Ducks Digest. So I got to give you a shout out, Dylan. You've been doing some awesome stuff for us. How the heck are you?
Kind of gassed after that intro, but yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's been a really exciting day. Everybody that I thought was going to commit and sign did. Everybody that I made graphics for last night signed, so that's good. I was kind of selfishly hoping that there wasn't going to be any more, just because I didn't make any more. But I'm glad with the crew that they brought on.
Yeah, man, we definitely have to talk about the new additions to Oregon's 2022 class. There were also some guys that were already committed, but they were just verbal commits. They chose to hold off, putting the pen to paper during that early signing period. And I think kind of as a result of that, it felt like this one was a little bit more eventful than the early signing period, right? And I think if you're a lot of these recruits, it makes sense for you to hold off, putting that pen to paper, because as you see, with the coaching carousel, some guys, they put the pen to paper, and things change in the blink of an eye, and you can be looking at a pretty messy situation. But nonetheless, the Ducks did land 3 new commitments today, which we are going to talk about in this episode of the podcast. Before we kind of break things down, and there's a bunch of stuff to get into, I don't know if we're even going to be able to hit all of it in our, hour-long show tonight. But do want to give a thank you to everyone that's watching live, and, encourage you guys to hop in the live chat and the comments, maybe throw some questions our way. And, depending on how things shake out with the, kind of breakdown here tonight, we'll do our best to get to some of those and want to keep boosting that interaction. And this show is for you guys, the fans, the listeners, the viewers. So just wanted to throw that out there before we break it all down. So Dylan, I think what I want to start with, it was a super busy day, for us over at Ducks Digest. I was texting you all day, as you well know. Things got started early. I mean, I was up at 5:30 getting ready to, get my coffee and get on the keyboard, get behind the keyboard and start firing stuff off. And, it really started with these the coaches, I was gonna say coaching pressers, but, Oregon Sports Network held a, National Signing Day event. And this was really our first chance to meet all of these new hires. We saw them at the basketball game against Oregon State. They were, participating in the t-shirt toss. You had Tosh Lapoy on the shirt cannon, and it was really cool. But this was our first chance to ultimately, hear from these coaches and get to know a little bit more about them.
Yeah, it was super cool to, kind of get to hear from them. I didn't, it seemed like they've been hired for a bit, a lot of them, and we hadn't really gotten introduced to them, as members of the media or, the Oregon fan base. You kind of saw those introductory, stories that would go up on Go Ducks and the stories that we would write. So you kind of get some background knowledge, but, there's a little bit of difference between what's on their bio and, who they are as people and who they are as coaches. So, we've gotten a look at Dan Lanning in the last couple, month and a half that he's been hired. So you kind of get a feel for him, but now you're starting to get a feel for Carlos Lachlan and Tosh Lapoy and Matt Polage. And even on Twitter, like if you guys don't follow them on Twitter, you get and Kenny Dillingham, especially, you get a good gist of what they're like as people on Twitter. It's pretty fun.
That's one of the coolest things about this staff, I think, and part of that probably can be attributed to their youth and make how relatable they are with a lot of these current players and recruits. That's been one of the talking points from these guys that have been coming through Eugene to check out Oregon football and see what's going on, what the vision is with this new staff. I think one of the coaches that I really enjoyed hearing from in particular today was Carlos Lachlan, the new running backs coach. Just hearing a little bit more about his story. That dude is just locked in. No pun intended, but man, that works perfectly. But seriously, I mean, he's just grinding all the time. He was talking about, you can ask Coach Lanning, you can ask my wife. I'm on 24/7. It's football 24/7. I don't sleep. It's not a shoot, I can't remember what it wasn't. It was something along the lifestyle. Man, I was on a roll there for a second, but it was just about him saying he's completely bought in to football, and it's just his main focus, and he's not stopping. And I think that when you look at a little bit of the uncertainty that the Ducks have kind of seen at the running back position, with Travis Dye and Trey Benson both electing to transfer, I think if I'm an Oregon fan, I can't listen to what Coach Laughlin is saying and not get fired up and not have some confidence that this is ultimately a guy that can really get the job done and take the Oregon running backs to the next level.
Yeah, and I love that you got to ask Coach Lanning about him at the presser today, and he was saying, he got it out the mud. This is a guy that's earned everything that he's got, and the fact that he's now at a Power 5 program and he's the running backs coach, it's it says a lot about him. And I know Dan Lanning was saying something about how they were they were up late at night drawing plays on a mirror last night. They all live in a house together, or some of them do, and I could probably bet that Coach Lachlan was there helping out drawing plays up on the mirror. So yeah, he's a guy that I absolutely love following on Twitter. It was dope to hear him talk kind of for the first time. He's just an energetic guy. I mean, if you were kind of missing some of the energy from guys like Aaron Feld and Joe Salavea that you saw on Twitter, you're not lacking with Carlos Lachlan at all. I mean, this guy is just a ball of energy. If you need any sort of motivation or just need to get pumped up for the day, check out his Twitter or listen to the guy talk, because he is awesome. I'm a big fan already.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some more of the quotations that I tweeted out this morning, over on Twitter at Torres Sports. And just some of them that stick out to me. He says, "I'm a very competitive person. I look at all the top running backs coaches across the country. No knock on them, but they motivate me, and I'm coming. With these young guys, we're coming." And I can't help but get fired up hearing that, especially with all the youth that the Oregon running back room now. I was going to say exudes, but I don't know if that's the right word, because that's just the fact of the matter is it is a very young room. I don't know if the Ducks are still thinking about maybe adding a guy from the transfer portal. Jarek Broussard did end up committing to Michigan State. He was looking like the Ducks' top option at running back out in the portal. But Oregon did add a commitment from Jordan James. Maybe we can kind of segue into a little bit of some breakdown on the guys that we want to talk about. Ducks earning a signature from Jordan James here on National Signing Day, flipping him from the defending champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. And that was the first commitment of the day for the Ducks. And man, it's definitely a good way to get things started.
Yeah, that one took me by surprise a couple weeks ago. I remember we were talking about how, they had interest in him, but he was verbally committed to Georgia still. And the fact that he never decommitted, I think it says something about the Georgia coaching staff as well, just to be able to hang on to him through that entire process up until the very end. But he didn't sign. I think I read that he was out of town when the early signing period happened. But the fact that he had a relationship already with Coach Lanning, he had a relationship with Coach Lachlan, I believe, from what I heard. And he's just a phenomenal running back. I think they really needed a running back for this class. It looked like for most of the time they weren't going to get one. And this is a very, very good one to get. As you can see, and as Coach Lanning said, he's a one-play touchdown kind of guy. He's a guy that can, absolutely fly. He's, not super built. I mean, 5'10", 205. It's impressive for 200, a 200-pounder as a senior in high school. But he plays with power, he plays with speed, and he's got a really good vision. He also had a really good offensive line that gave him wide open holes to run through, and having an experienced offensive line in Eugene will definitely help him. But I think this is a guy that could contribute right away. You look at Byron Cardwell's probably projected to be number one on that running back room, and then Sean Dollar's coming back healthy. And we'll see what Seven McGee does if he gets into the running back room. But I think Jordan James is a guy that can contribute right away. I mean, he's just a bowling ball. He's just running right off of dudes. It's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, we're looking at some film over here on YouTube of Jordan James's senior season with Oakland High School out there in Tennessee. I think some of the things that stand out to me, Dylan, I mean, I really like his running style. It's just, for me, I feel like the word that kind of stands out is rugged. You know, he has his little kind of arm swing. But he just, it's tough, hard-nosed football. You know, I think it's kind of that brand that the Ducks probably want to establish, you know, given how they've prioritized the trenches in the 2022 recruiting class. And the guy is agile. He can really change direction and scoot around defenders. And, I think back to how we were talking about Carlos Lachlan earlier. And when he was talking on, the coach's show this morning, he laid out a couple of the criteria that he really prioritizes in his running backs. And that's owning the ball. So, you know, hanging on to the ball, I think were kind of the words that he was saying. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but I think you'll find almost any coach really prioritizes that. You know, Oregon fans know how costly fumbles can be based on, some pretty big games in the past few seasons. But then also being able to initiate contact on your own terms, I believe was the phrasing, and then avoid contact on your own terms. Was a really interesting way to put it. And you want to have guys that are, versatile and not afraid of the contact, but they can also have that finesse to their game to scoot around defenders and obviously, like we saw with some of James's highlights, keep plays going, never say die kind of an attitude and mentality. So that's something I really like with James here. But the cool thing is that obviously there's the on-field impact. You see Oregon's running back room, Byron Cardwell looks like he's poised to be the number one back, but there's a lot of time between now and even spring football and fall camp. So a lot can happen in that time, but we do know for a fact that the Ducks lost CJ Verdell and Travis Dye. So you figured that they needed to make an addition here at running back some way or another. And I think with the addition of James, he seems like another physical runner like Cardwell. McGee kind of stands out as that finesse option right now. Very versatile. I talked with Steven last night about the possibility of maybe seeing a 2-back set under Kenny Dillingham and how cool it would be to be able to just have more options to flex and move 7 around. And then you have Sean Dollars, who I think is kind of a tweener on the limited sample size that we've seen, but having some backs that are real physical and can also have that home run speed like we saw with James on a lot of his plays is really crucial and good to have. And the other thing that I wanted to get into, Dylan, with this addition of Jordan James, the Ducks get back into the Southeast, which I think is definitely a huge storyline that maybe isn't being talked about enough with this commitment. Obviously, Duck fans know how much their presence in the Southeast took a hit when Mario Cristobal, decided to leave for Miami. TJ Dudley ended up committing to Clemson today. Tanner Bailey committed to South Carolina. And then there's a lot of people out in Texas that the Ducks, ultimately lost out on. But I think that's another big added benefit of getting this commitment from Jordan James and doing it on National Signing Day when the Ducks and every other team is under that national spotlight.
And to get him over 2 SEC schools as well, including one he was already committed to. This one was really impressive for me. The fact that they were able to, get that last visit right before the signing day, and the fact that they were able to convince him that, Oregon is the place for you. I mean, George, it's hard to choose against the reigning national champion, one that you've been signed on to for, 10 months. I mean, it's super impressive no matter where he goes. It's impressive to pry someone away from that. And of course, Georgia has an incredible history of pumping out running backs. You mentioned the word rugged when you were talking about Jordan James. I agree with that, but I also am kind of reminded of like Alvin Kamara when he was coming out of college, where he can put his shoulder down and run through you, but he's also super slippery and smooth. Like there were a couple of times where he ran through defenders and he was standing straight up, like it looked like they hardly even touched him. And he's just bowling through guys standing up, which is really impressive. He looks bigger on screen than he's listed at 5'10". He looks taller, and I don't know. He's got long legs for a guy that's 5'10", and I'm really impressed with his statistics. Looks like he's got over 3,600 yards in the last 2 years alone, and 52 rushing touchdowns. So no shortage of production in his high school career, and getting into the Southeast, especially in this class where it seems like there's been an emphasis almost on the Northwest and Oregon, which of course that's, as Dan Lanning said, you have to attack home first. You got to get wins at home. But, there's plenty of guys that have that experience recruiting in the SEC and in that Southeast area, and going to Tennessee, which is a place that, even the last coaching staff hadn't really delved into too much. It's really impressive to show that, yeah, we can get the guys at home, but we can go take, a kid out of the reigning national championship team, just right out of their backyard pretty much.
Dan Lanning and the rest of the Oregon staff securing a big win, in this recruiting battle that we see unfold on National Signing Day over the likes of Georgia and Florida. And I think it says a lot about, the faith that James clearly has in this Oregon staff, and for them to get him as late as they came on, I think says a lot. I think once Lachlan and Lanning kind of got on the same page with the rest of the staff, we saw two backs, I guess we could say three with Broussard as well, kind of emerge as priorities for the staff. So we had Broussard, Jordan James, and Andrew Paul out of Dallas. And they actually kind of ended up trading running backs, right? James commits to Oregon, and Andrew Paul ends up committing to Georgia after, obviously a successful trip out to Athens over the weekend and the days leading up to National Signing Day. Dylan, I want to talk about Lanning just kind of overall, and really, I think the mood that I feel like I'm kind of getting from, excuse me, from the Oregon fan base now that we've had. I think almost 2 months since he got hired officially, I think is kind of the range that we're approaching right now. I think the easiest way to start this kind of topic is you have a young guy, and this is his first head coaching job. And the easiest way that I can put it, the simplest way I can put it, Dan Lanning has bought in 1,000,000% to any and everything that makes Oregon unique and fun, whether that be as a brand, as a university, as a team. And we're seeing the results of it pay off right in front of our eyes.
It just having you say that, talking about him being bought into everything, not just a program, I should say.
Yes, we're a program podcast.
We're a program podcast here. I heard the reference on one of the last shows. The fact that he's bought into not just that, but the university and the community as well. It reminds me of when after Cristobal left, and there was this just constant wash of, we need someone who understands the university and the program and the everything that it's about and what they're working towards. And when they brought in Dan Lanning, it seemed like it was kind of hit or miss with the fan base. Like some people were all in on the fact that he was, he just led the Georgia Bulldogs to the best defense in the country in a national championship. And people were excited that he was young and it was an elite recruiter. And then some people were like, well, he's never been a head coach before, and he doesn't understand, he's not really a West Coast guy. He doesn't really understand what we're after. And after listening to him and talking to him a couple times since he's been hired in the last month and a half, 2 months, I don't think that's really the case where you can say that he doesn't understand it. I think he understands it just as well as, you thought he would maybe 2-3 years from now. So I'm really impressed with how much he's starting to get it, just being in Eugene now for about a full month since the Georgia Bulldogs won the championship. I think he's been in Eugene close to a month now. And it's really exciting that he's so bought in, and he's bought in with the coaching staff and the players that were there and the players that they're bringing in. I think he just checks all the boxes. They wanted a guy who could recruit at the level of Mario Cristobal and that staff. And of course, he's brought in so many guys that can do that as well. But the fact that he's a younger coach and it's kind of fresh almost, and X's and O's, he's, a great defensive mind, and he's brought on tons of great offensive and defensive minds and guys that are passionate about football, obviously, as we've talked about, guys that are passionate about recruiting and, guys that are passionate about Oregon. So I'm really excited. My expectations were really high for, them replacing this coaching staff, because there were a lot of guys that just were very committed to Oregon and this program. And I'm loving what I'm seeing so far out of Dan Lanning and his staff.
It's hard not to be impressed with what we've seen from Lanning so far. And I feel like, anytime you want to, as we kind of are right now, let's be honest, heaping praise on a coach, I think you do have to take it with a grain of salt and, acknowledge that we have to see what the on-field product looks like. But where we are right now, Dylan, in February on National Signing Day, we're evaluating him for everything that we're able to see the results of right now. And in large part, that is the results on the recruiting trail, the buy-in from the current players, the unity from the staff that we're seeing on the all these coaching pressers. And he's knocking it out of the park in all of those aspects. We're talking about buying in. Look at the buy-in that we've seen with the Nike brand. I think that's huge. You see him in these pictures on social media, really playing up, all of the awesome shoes that he's getting hooked up with. He's realizing everything that Mario Cristobal did, I think, to take advantage of the brand that is Oregon, that is Oregon football, that is Oregon athletics. And he's just showing that he's more or less, I would say, picking up right where he left off. And I think that's really been, exemplified in getting all these former commits back. I'm not saying it's easy to land guys, but you see these former commits hopping back in the fold. I think that it was a great idea and great strategy for the staff to be able to make last weekend's recruiting visits so impactful. Once you get them on campus, I mean, Dave Iuli said it today. I feel like, he felt the love in Eugene, and it's just a really special place. We saw it with Sir Mel's, all the way back in June after the recruiting dead period ended. Once you get guys on campus, it just really starts selling itself. And then you bring in all these recruiters and coaches with great experience, and it just really starts snowballing. And I think a lot of the momentum that we're seeing them, build and kind of pick up off of. I mean, let me backtrack for a second here. I'm getting a little riled up. But after Cristobal left, it seemed, Dylan, like we couldn't refresh Twitter fast enough to see the next guy decommit. And then to get all the way to this point now, where I believe on 247, it has them, right at 25, right in that top 25 range for the 2022 class. It's pretty remarkable the way that Oregon is really poised to finish here, and they might not be done.
There are guys that commit to a coaching staff or a coach. There are guys that commit to a program. Maybe they grew up a fan of it. And then there's some people that commit to the university. And I feel like when you go to Oregon and you visit that campus and you talk to the coaching staff, the last coaching staff or this one, it just seems like from everybody I've talked to and everybody I've read up on, it just seems like they buy in to everything. And especially now, I mean, the university, we both graduated from there. The university is impressive. I've never heard anybody that visited there say anything negative about it. And the facilities are top notch. The coaching staff is, like you said, bought in. It's just a brilliant, job by this coaching staff to keep that momentum going, because there was that little dip where there were a lot of guys that, entered the transfer portal that were on the roster, and then guys that decommitted. And then, it just seemed like we're waiting for the new coaching staff to come in, and it just seems like everything's falling off. And now we sit a month and a half later and we're praising the heck out of the coaching staff. And, the Oregon's back in the top 25, approaching really close at the top of the Pac-12. I believe they're sitting at number 3 right now, if I'm not mistaken, according to 247 in the conference. So of course there was a ton of work done. It's like you said, it's not easy to get guys, but the fact that they got Florence back, they got Iuli back, they got Winston back, That's huge. Of course, you would like to get some more of those guys back, but it's a fit thing. It's a priority thing. Not everybody's going to be, wanting to fit in with a certain scheme, a certain system. So I'm really excited that they were able to get back the guys they were able to get back. And I think Florence and Iuli, I think that sent a message to some of the other guys that committed and signed recently, especially Trajan Williams. You were talking about that a little bit, and I think with guys in the future in 2023 and 24, maybe that sends a message too.
Yeah, you mentioned, sending a message to Trajan Williams. I think kind of what you're getting at is just that Oregon as a state is going to be prioritized, and they want to get the best guys from in-state. Before we talk about more specific players, Dylan, I kind of just wanted to wrap up on the point that we kind of got into here with just the buy-in that we're seeing from Lanning and how it's really having a trickle-down effect, because he's talking about wanting to spend as much time with the players as he possibly can. Both he himself, obviously, and the staff as a whole. That's obviously going to be super important with kind of getting everybody on the same page. Shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. Give me just a second. So we're talking about the buy-in. Oh, and then also I think with the class that they have in place right now in 2022, we talked about how they may not be done. I think that the staff has been selective. I think what's kind of interesting is you saw how poor the situation was as far as the class that they inherited, with so many people reopening their recruitment. But I think also you see that they obviously needed help at a lot of spots, and there's no doubt in my mind. Look at a receiver, for example. You think there's nobody on the recruiting trail or from the transfer portal that wants to play wide receiver at Oregon? I don't care that there's unknowns about the offense right now. There's no doubt in my mind that somebody wanted to come and take that spot and fill that need. But I think the Oregon staff should be, congratulated or acknowledged for the fact that they're not just taking commitments left and right. They're sending out offers left and right, and that's a whole nother discussion. But I think it's just really interesting to see how they've kind of approached that. As far as, still trying to fill some missing pieces. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about with the buy-in with Lanning, sorry, this is the last point that I'm remembering now, was the connection with the former players. I think that is a huge piece of the equation as far as just having a healthy program. We're seeing, like I just talked about, Coach Laughlin, posting all these pictures with former guys, former Ducks, legendary Ducks at that. I think the last one that I saw was him and LeGarrette Blount, hanging out. So he's making sure that he has these healthy relationships with the players, that they feel like Oregon's a place they want to come back to, that they can be proud of, that it's their program. Because that was one of the first things he said was the program wouldn't be what it is without the players. So that was kind of a ton of different points, Dylan. But I wanted to make sure that I hit on that before we got too far from it.
Yeah. Which one do I want to tackle? I think the former players thing is really important, just because of after the Cristobal thing and entering the coaching staff, there was that letter that came out that I don't want to get too much into because I don't remember what all it said, but it just seemed like there was kind of this tension between, maybe that's the right word, maybe it's a little too strong, but it seemed like there kind of was this they were off put, I guess. Some of the alumni, former players that, made the program what it is. They were just kind of off put a little bit by the coaching staff. And I think that hearing about Coach Lanning talk to, all these guys over Zoom and meeting all these guys and, with Haloti Nada, Kenyon Barner, LeGarrette Blount, that just sends a message too about, they have so much priority with when they get to Oregon, when they're a new staff. There's, talking with the current guys, there's talking to the transfer portal guys, there's, connecting with each other even. And maybe it seems like those, former players kind of get left behind. They're not the top priority because it seems like everything is so important with, who's currently on your roster and who you're trying to get. But the fact that they made them a priority, within the first month or so, that says a lot about, the attention that they, the attention to detail that they have towards making this program great again. I don't want to say great again, but you know what I mean? Like they want it to be, like you said, something that the alumni can be proud of. And, it represents something that, is the Oregon Ducks, the Oregon football program. It's back to being a national powerhouse.
Yeah, and I think kind of maybe the point you were trying to get at is I think that Lanning and the staff really just want to get Oregon to where they know it's capable of being. We've seen how strong the program has been in recent years. The 2021 season definitely left a lot to be desired in various areas, and anytime you have a coach leave, it's going to create some tension and some uncertainty. But I think the way that Lanning's approaching this just shows that there's incredible attention to detail. And then from a recruiting aspect, I think there was some coach that said it today, or staffer. It might have been Marshall Malco, who is just a baller of a hire by Lanning, and we could have a whole video talking about him. Maybe it was him that said there are no small things in recruiting, and we're just seeing that with the interviews that we have with guys that are committing that come to Oregon and share their experience and what it's like walking around and interacting with everything. So I think that's definitely an encouraging sign if you're a fan, as you kind of weigh out, still kind of being in a little bit of limbo and just not knowing what next season's going to look like. But when you get good recruits, come into the Ducks, you're certainly setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of speculation at this point because we don't really know what next season's going to look like. But I mean, the future does look very, very bright. And the thing is that I always think about, and I think we've talked about before, is like it could have been a lot worse for a program like Oregon. They were in a good place when Mario Cristobal left. Obviously you talk about the guys that entered the portal and decommitted, but overall there was still a ton of talent on the roster, and they were probably still going to be, a favorite in the Pac-12 regardless. But it just seems like there was a lot of momentum to be upheld, and that's not an easy thing to uphold, especially for a guy who's never been a head coach before, and a lot of guys who are in Power 5 roles for the first time, even if you want to extend it that far. Oregon is a program that's very historic if you think about just the last 10-20 years. There've been a lot of successful elite teams, and that's a huge reason why so many prospects want to go to Oregon, why so many coaches want to go to Oregon, is because of the success that they've shown. And I feel like when the last couple of years, when they have this momentum on the field and they kind of come up short, especially last year, losing 3 of the last 4 games and a couple of them in blowout fashion, it's kind of like they're just a couple pieces away. And then the coach leaves and the decommitments happen, and you're just kind of like, okay, where are we going here? And it didn't seem like there were a ton of options where, they would be at where they were toward the end of the season or better. And it seems like they're at least at where they were at the end of last season. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned about anything we've seen so far with the coaching staff and the players that they've brought in. But it should give Oregon fans a lot of hope based on, like we've talked about for a bit, the fact that the coaching staff is bought in, the fact that the coaching staff is done even, that's a huge thing. And then the fact that they have a respectable and sizable recruiting class in 2022, that's huge as well.
We know the coaching staff isn't done at a certain ACC program, might be in the state of Florida. The Hurricanes are still waiting to fill out that staff, and that's a whole other conversation. But Dylan, want to talk about another guy that the Ducks were able to get in the fold today in their 2022 class, a local guy in the Pacific Northwest. We talked a little bit about him earlier, but Dave Iuli, offensive lineman out of Puyallup. Here's another awesome graphic if you guys are on YouTube that Dylan put together for us. How about you tackle this one and kind of get started for us?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm in a similar position than I was just a month and a half ago, where I said that Mario Cristobal wasn't going to leave Miami, and I was like, wasn't going to go to Miami, wasn't going to leave Oregon, and I had to apologize. I think it was just the last stream where I said I think it's going to come down to USC and Miami. I think it's an uphill battle for Oregon, and I was wrong on that. I think a lot of people were. I'm not alone in that, but I definitely think that I definitely thought it was an uphill battle for Oregon to climb based on, it just wasn't. It didn't seem like he was going to get that visit until the very end. I hadn't really heard that they were, trying to make an effort. Didn't really see them make an in-house visit or anything like that. It just seemed pretty quiet. And then Miami came flying in, which wasn't really a surprise because of all the great things he said about, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, Joe Salavea, even. Like, he loved that coaching staff, and he talked about it in a video. He had like a 3-year relationship with them. So that's a really hard thing to beat, especially when, he came to Oregon the first time because of Mirabal and Cristobal. Like, that's a really hard thing to beat. And it was just this battle of priority. Like, does he want to play for the coaches that, he's admired for 3 years and gotten along with so well? Does he want to stay closer to home? Does he want to go to the NFL? Like, what is his top priority? I think with him, when he decommitted, my head went to USC because he talked about the NFL. He talked about the NIL. He talked about Los Angeles, still playing fairly close to home. And, my head went there immediately just because I felt like it kind of checked those boxes. But when he talked about Oregon today, it still felt like what he was talking about before, when he committed to Oregon. It still felt like all those things matched. He talked about the love from the coaching staff, the love from the other recruits, the love from the community, and the fact that the Oregon fans never really died down and they never really kind of forgot about him. I think it kind of reminded him when he was on that visit, just why he committed in the first place. And so, speaking more to him as a player, I mean, he's just a mauler. I think, and when we hopped on a live after he committed the first time, I think I said something about if football doesn't work out, he can work at IHOP and be a pancake artist, something like that. I think that was him.
I feel like I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's, 6'5", 315. He's athletic. He's versatile. He can move them inside or out. And he can just straight up move dudes. He can straight up bully dudes. And that's what this Oregon offensive line should be about. Mario Cristobal and Mirabal brought that, built that up, prioritizing the trenches and just being powerful, being dominant up front. And I think with Adrian Clam, with his NFL experience and his collegiate experience, I don't feel like that's really going to die down. And Dave Iuli is a guy that will make any program better. And I don't expect him to, probably be a day one starter. I think he has the talent to definitely do so. But I just think that with so many guys returning, it would be hard for me to see him getting, the starting nod over somebody that's got a couple years of experience at this point. In terms of the future, I mean, this guy's a guy that can be a staple of the offensive line for a long time to come. And, it's awesome that he comes back to Oregon, and we're talking about him as an Oregon Duck once again.
You had a lot of great points, Dylan, just kind of about where things kind of stood from a recruiting standpoint after he decommitted. I definitely have to, kind of fess up in the same vein as I really thought this was. I didn't make a prediction, but I was kind of, the way I was talking, I thought it was going to come down to Miami and USC, or maybe a Miami versus Oregon, since the Ducks got the last visit. And I was kind of giving some I was given a lot of credence and put a lot of faith in Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal because of that long relationship that they built. But at the same time, I did remember how we were talking, since you were kind of our lead insider leading up to his first commitment, about how important family was. And, this could very well be an example, another example rather, of, those thousands of miles seem like they stretch even further and they become that much more real in those final hours, leading up to your commitment, and really having to, accept the fact that you could be thousands of miles away from your family on the other side of the country. And it really did seem like, this is Eugene was where his heart was and where he wanted to be. I got to give credit to Adam Gorney of Rivals. He did an awesome interview with Dave over on YouTube. And my favorite part of the whole thing was when he was asked about Dan Lanning, and he basically said, when they talk about Dan the man, it's because he's that man. And he one of the coolest things perhaps about Iuli, aside from his play on the field, is just how much different of a person he is off of it. I've never met the guy. I've never talked to him personally. I'm trying to maybe get him on this podcast someday. That'd be an awesome guest. But the dude just exudes so much energy. He's just having fun with everything. Probably has right now, I'd say, my favorite commitment video of the 2022 class. You guys can see those over on Twitter, and then these guys post them on their Instagrams too. So I try to retweet those and make sure that they're out there. You had Dan Lanning doing the haka in Dave's commitment video. And it was just a work of art, and I really like how they're capitalizing the momentum. Another thing that I also just wanted to hit on, you alluded to it a little bit. Let's give Adrian Clem some credit and the rest of that offensive line staff. I think that you have that NFL experience. It's definitely going to be something that you can still sell. It was cool to get to kind of meet him virtually with the coaches show earlier today. But I think another reason this is really important, Dylan, is because a lot of this class is super defensive heavy. It's heavy defense. I don't know what the correct wording is there, but it's a defense heavy class, the guys that they have in the fold now. So I think it is important to show that they can get another guy on offense too and make some noise there. But what was interesting, and maybe we could kind of use this as the wrapping point on Iuli, because we're already up to 40 minutes. When he was announced in his commitment video, I don't know if you caught this detail. It said O-line/D-line. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he's maybe a guy that is going to contribute on the defensive line, but we saw Jordan Riley coming over from Nebraska. He's another huge body. Sam Taimani is another big guy. You're talking about multiple guys that are 300 plus pounds, but this dude's a mauler regardless of what side of the ball he's playing on, as you can see here on the tape.
Yeah, so I know that when we were talking over the summer, and by the way, you talked about his character and his charisma. Sometimes when you just are talking to recruits after recruits, like, there's some that stand out more than others. And I felt like when he answered the phone, I just kind of I lit up, because the dude is just full of energy. He's so much fun to talk to, and Oregon fans, I think, are going to absolutely love him. And I can't wait for the spring when he gets to talk to the media, because I feel like everybody should get to know him and his character. But I know that the last staff was recruiting him mostly as an offensive lineman, because I think that's most of his experience. But having that versatility in his back pocket is obviously huge. And you talked about the depth they already are starting to accrue at the defensive line. I don't think they'd probably try to move him up front on the defense as well. Just because of how dominant he looks as an offensive lineman and how much film there is on him. I would imagine that that's probably where they're going to have him on this roster with this staff and in that system. But yeah, I think just having a bunch of guys that are huge bodies that are versatile. I mean, look at DJ Johnson, maybe not the biggest body, but he's definitely a supreme athlete that you can put, on as a tight end or as a defensive lineman. So they've got a bunch of guys, and I'm sure we'll talk about another one in Jackson Powers Johnson here soon. I know Dan Lanning really likes versatile guys, and he's got another one in Dave Iuli for sure.
All right. A lot of great stuff on Dave Iuli. We have one more, commit that we want to talk about before we dig into some questions and talk about the Jackson Powers Johnson news, because I think that's definitely another significant point that we have to hit on. But the last guy that the Ducks got in the 2022 class, as far as today, Wednesday, February 2nd, National Signing Day, was Central Catholic High School linebacker Marion Winston. He is the brother of former Duck Lamar Winston, and it definitely is another solid ad for the Ducks to get. Another more highly rated guy in state, coming from the Portland area. And Dylan, how about you talk about this guy a little bit while I see if I can grab some highlights so we can share it with the audience.
Yeah, I think this is another versatile guy on defense. I mean, he's a guy who can, put his hand down and rush the quarterback as an edge rusher, and he's a guy that can drop back and, defend the run and drop back in coverage as a linebacker. I think there are a couple different people that say he's an edge versus he's a linebacker, and I think he's one of those hybrid guys that you kind of need that can do both. With this defense, it kind of remains to be seen how some of those edge versus linebacker guys will be used. I know Tim DeRuyter's defense, they were pretty heavy on that compared to Andy Avalos's defense. They like to, with Kayvon, he liked to rush him off the edge and also drop him back into coverage. If the defensive scheme looks like that with Lapoy and Poage, I think Marion Winston is a guy that can fit right in with that. He's super explosive. I think that's one of the first things that pops off to me. He's a pretty light guy for a guy that can play off the edge, 240. But he's super quick, super athletic. Kind of reminds me of Braden Swinson when he was coming out of high school, just kind of that slimmer guy, lighter guy, but can really explode and really get after a guy with the ball. He finds ways to get to the ball. He forces fumbles. He's taken a couple of fumbles back, I think. And gets his hand on a couple footballs. So you love to see that. But yeah, I mean, I think the versatility is huge. A guy that can play linebacker wherever you need him, off the edge. I think the edge is probably on this roster where I'd see him get the most playing time, just because you have to replace Kayvon, and you have a couple guys who aren't really true edge rushers, but guys that can play off the edge. I think that's a guy that, he can make his name off the edge. And, adding a former commit as well, and a guy from Oregon. We talked about that a little bit. A guy from Oregon, a guy from the Portland area. That's huge. I feel like he might have been one of the first guys that Dan Lanning visited, because he said today that, his first day when he could get out on the road, he went to the Portland area, which is where Marion's at. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of the first guys that Lanning visited.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges for this coaching staff is going to be replacing Kayvon Thibodeau. And, just I think with the timing, of the coaching transition and, where things were kind of at on the recruiting calendar, I'm not sure if you're not going to find a guy that's going to replace a KT, like a plug and play kind of deal. You're certainly not going to find him out of the portal, I don't think, because if you have those really high end guys, they're probably not looking to move schools. I think you're probably going to have to rely more so on the prep ranks, as we see with the Ducks getting Marion Winston here. And I think that I don't expect, I'm not projecting that kind of, production or anything, but, after talking with John Garcia, the director of recruiting for us at SI, he told me that he sees, Winston projecting a little bit more as a guy who's going to put his hand in the dirt for the Ducks. So I think you add him to kind of shore up your depth a little bit at the position for sure. You get another in-state guy, which is great. You can join Braden Swinson and Trevin Maye, Adrian Jackson, Mace Funa, and kind of learn under their tutelage. And you're getting a guy that's super motivated and already really bought into the program. It's literally in his blood. I know he was saying after his commitment today that how cool of a story would it be for me to play at the same spot that my brother played at. And then he said, kind of put in a little playful touch, and for the younger brother to be better. So he's really motivated to put his best foot forward and to, make a name for himself at Oregon. And I think you fill a position of need, from a roster standpoint. And, he also gets to reunite with Trajan Williams. They're posting pictures today saying, this is kind of the childhood dream, and we're reunited playing for the Ducks. So just overall, a really great story with the Ducks picking up Winston.
I feel like Trajan Williams, we talked about it a little bit, that, maybe that was something that, kind of had him bought in and he was able to sign was, Marion coming back, because Trajan didn't sign during the early signing period, and Marion Winston decommitted pretty late, if I remember right. I think it was like later in December when he decommitted. I don't remember exactly when it was. But I feel like, Trajan has always seemed to be bought in with Oregon. I think he got a couple other offers, but I don't remember him taking any other visits. So he was one of those guys you kind of expected to still sign with Oregon, but kind of still look around and see what the coaching staff was going to do and prioritize. And I think that getting his good friend and another in-state guy from Oregon and Winston, I feel like that kind of pushed the needle for him to go ahead and sign the deal.
You mean what? You mean Williams?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I think the only other visit that I saw on social media for Winston was Florida. So, we saw with Winston, the pump faking that was really rampant all throughout, the land out all throughout the country today for whatever reason. That's been a big trend. We don't have to get into that too much. But yeah, we've now talked about all three recruits that committed to the Ducks today. Like we talked about, Trajan Williams did put the pen to paper, so the Ducks got to ink one of their top unsigned commits that was kind of still up there. But now we want to get into a little bit of kind of some Q&A stuff, talking about your guys' comments and seeing what's on your guys' mind. One of the biggest topics that we wanted to touch on was how Dan Lanning said that true freshman offensive lineman Jackson Powers Johnson is going to be starting spring practice, playing on defense. So you look at the defensive line, and then we have Nick's comment here saying on the screen, Jackson Powers will be a great defensive tackle. And I think it says a lot about where the roster's at and the depth that they've accrued along the defensive line to have the luxury. I think really to be able to put Jackson on the defensive line. We saw a very limited sample size of that during the Alamo Bowl. Which I think you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, right? With so many of the coaches, no longer here, and people not playing for both teams, whether it be injury or opt outs. But Jackson is just a supreme athlete from what I've been able to see. And I think when he was, going to camps on the recruiting trail coming out of high school, he did post some clips of him, doing some defensive line work. And I think that the potential is there. It's just really a great kid that just wants to get on the field and make an impact. He says, I just like being violent, and he just wants to go wherever the team needs him.
Yeah, I'm looking at his bio on Go Ducks right now, and it looks like he finished his high school career at Corner Canyon. Had 124 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 8 passes deflected, and a forced fumble. So this is not completely new to him. And obviously at the end of last year with the Ducks, he got to play in the Alamo Bowl along the defensive line. Actually started up front, I believe, in the Alamo Bowl on the defensive line. So I really like that. I think, I don't want to say you're set along the offensive line, but you kind of know what your rotation is going to be with so many guys returning. You got some young guys in the fold as well. But I think Jackson Powers Johnson is one of those guys that is going to produce, and he's one of those guys that can help out. Like you said, he just wants to produce. He just wants to get in there and, knock some dudes over no matter what side of the ball he's on. And I'm excited to see it. Do you know if he's going to be playing along the offensive line still as well, or are they completely shifting him?
We didn't really get that in depth as far as that question. But I think, it's definitely good to be able to kind of move him around a little bit and see where things are. I got some of his high school highlights put on the screen here, so hopefully we can get a little bit of a better sense of, kind of what he looks like on defense. But I think just kind of going off that, I think about DJ Johnson, coming back for another year. I think he's another guy that you definitely want to have focus on defense in this coming year. I think with Maliki Montevau and Terrence Ferguson, and then Cam McCormick's coming back. You have hopefully Patrick Herbert's going to be healthy. You feel pretty confident and comfortable, I think, about the tight end depth right now to be able to have DJ Johnson and Jackson Powers Johnson on the defensive line. So we'll have to see how that experiment ultimately works out. But you also have guys like John's talking about Brandon Dorless and Popo Amavai. They're also gonna be guys that are competing in that room. So Dan Lanning just talked about when I asked him about the trenches and kind of why he's prioritizing that, and he just said the best teams that I've played on have won the line of scrimmage flat out. So I think this is another move that makes a lot of sense, and I'm excited to see what Jackson can do along the defensive line.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that defensive line. Coming into the off season, it felt like that was going to be one of the key things. It felt like last season too, before last season, that defensive line just needed some more beef, and they got a ton of it. And adding Jackson Powers Johnson to it, is a very athletic guy. He's a guy that can play really inside or out along the defense, along the offensive line, and could play in the middle on defense as well. It's going to be really fun to see him get coached by Tony Tuioti. I wouldn't hate to see him along the offensive line either. He was a plug and play guy, got a lot of experience in the middle of last season too. So I think no matter what he does, he's going to produce and be really fun to watch because he's another one of those charismatic dudes. And I'm just thinking about a locker room with him and Dave Iuli. That's going to be a lot of fun.
No doubt about it. All right, Jackson Powers Johnson looks like he could get some time along the defensive line next year. So we got a big storyline already to watch heading into spring ball. So let's see some of the other questions and comments that we have here. This one's coming from Gerard Berry. Thanks for tuning in, Gerard. He's become a regular, friend of the program here at Ducks Dish. He asks, can you discuss how the scholarship limits work? I believe the limit is 85 and that Oregon is currently at or almost at 85. Can they ever be over 85? Do they have to be down to 85 by a certain date? Yeah, Gerard, I'm going to be honest. This is an area that I really do need to dig into a little bit more. as far as, the scholarship math goes. I think that kind of just to kind of, I guess, give an educated guess, I would think that they need to be down to 85. I don't know, Dylan, what do you think? Like fall camp, certainly by the start of the season. I feel like being over 85 or kind of flirting with that limit during the off season probably isn't that big of a deal. But at the same time, maybe I could be totally wrong in saying that, seeing that you got to get guys here, get them enrolled in classes, see who's here on, Oregon will probably get some preferred walk-ons kind of coming in here as well. And then how much eligibility some of these transfers have left. So it's really got a lot of moving parts, and that's kind of the most that I have to say about it right now. But I think that also speaks to just how selective they've been. Lanning did get asked about the additions of Andrew Boyle, the Washington State transfer kicker, and Jordan Riley, who we talked about earlier in the pod, coming over from Nebraska. But I think just with how recently they committed, I think there's still some, compliance and signing paperwork and things of that matter that need to be worked out, because he said that he wasn't able to talk to in depth on that.
Yeah, and I know Boyle officially signed today from what I saw. I don't know if Jordan Riley did just yet, but I can't really speak too much to the scholarship limit. It's not something I'm super intelligible on. It's not something I can explain, I guess, any better than Max can. But I feel like they're kind of close. I know James Crepia with the Oregonians been tweeting about it often, and I think he's always the one that's asking about it as well. And I think he said they were around like 80, 81 or something like that. But there are still a couple guys on the roster that the status is uncertain, and there's still people to add through the transfer portal potentially. So I feel like they're probably close. Maybe they can add a couple more people, because I know Dan Lanning was talking about how there's still, a couple of places that you could probably enhance your program. He never really says we have a need or something like that. He always says we're trying to enhance that position. So I'd probably say they have a couple more, but that's kind of an educated guess as well.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, hopefully, not the most complete answer that we wanted to give you guys, but hopefully, help to paint the picture a little bit better and still give you some useful insight. Micah Time, thanks for the joining the show, and thanks for your comment. He says, I really wish Trey Benson didn't, he said trade here, but I think transfer is what he means. 6'2" SEC build. Yeah, Trey Benson's a guy that I was super excited about, coming out of Greensville High School. It wasn't Greensville High School, but it was Greensville, Mississippi, out there in, the Southeast. He was a guy I was excited about with, him being a bigger back. I think he was the biggest back on Oregon's roster even last year. Saw him get a touchdown against Stony Brook. I think the thing that was really exciting and intriguing about him is that he had that size, but he also had that speed. I think, coming out of high school, I think he was touted at and clocked as a 4.4 40 guy, which is pretty remarkable when you look at, the frame that he was carrying. I think it was 6'2" and that 205, 210 pound, maybe even 215. I don't remember what he was listed at last season specifically. But, stuff happens. He obviously got banged up, which I'm sure hampered his progress clearly. But the running back room has really been one of the most fascinating positions to follow for Oregon, because I think I've said this in previous podcasts, it's kind of usually overflowing with talented guys that are, hoping to get carries. How long are you willing to wait in the wings? And then, during the course of this offseason, prior to Jordan James joining the fold today, it was looking a little bit, scary from a depth perspective. So definitely wish Trey well over at Florida State. And I think that, could be a great fit for him with how they look like they're, maybe trending in the right direction, trying to get that back on track with Norvell.
Yeah, I think the fact that you lose a guy who's such a big body, that was tough to see as well. I wasn't really surprised just based on, some of the movement that happened in that running backs room. And now it looks like Cardwell is going to be the biggest back of them all. He's listed right now at 6'2", and just to go back on what you're talking about with Benson's size, he was listed at 6'1", 215 on last year's roster. Excuse me. But Sean Dollars and Seven McGee, those guys are, a bit smaller, a bit speedier guys. So maybe, Jordan James is a guy who's 5'10", 205. He's a guy that can play with power. And so is Cardwell. So it makes me wonder if Maybe they try to add one more, maybe a guy that's kind of a power back, a third down, short yardage guy. I feel like you're still kind of safe with Cardwell in that position, or even a guy like Jordan James. Um, for me, I'd say it's always nice to have one of those huge running backs, but I mean, you can't count out a guy like Cardwell bulking up over the offseason. I mean, maybe he puts on some weight and maybe he comes in at 220, 225. Who knows?
All right, getting some good discussion on the running back position. Dylan, we are at an hour, but I wanted to check in with you. Maybe are you cool to go a little bit longer while we hit on some of these questions?
Let's do it. I'm having a good time.
All right, I'm having a great time too. I just need to make sure I get some food in my stomach after this crazy day. So we'll hit on some more of these guys, and then I'm planning to go live again tomorrow. So definitely want to come back for the next live stream here at Oregon Football Max Torres on YouTube. So Breezy has our next comment. Thanks for your comment, Breezy. Really says a lot about Lanning after he got this man, talking about Iuli to recommit after Cristobal had a year and a half to build a relationship, and Lanning landed him after 2 weeks. I'm here for all the Dave Iuli talk. What do you think about this one, Dylan?
Yeah, it kind of goes to what I was talking about before, and what Iuli said about. I think he said it goes as far back as 3 years with Cristobal and Mirabal. And he talked so highly of those guys. It just seemed like he was completely bought in. I feel like if Cristobal and Mirabal maybe went to a program closer, maybe in the Pac-12 or at least on the West Coast, maybe we're not talking about him coming back to Oregon, because I know how big a factor those guys played into his recruitment. But yeah, I mean, that's super impressive. The fact that it just seems so quiet with him in Oregon. He decommitted on Christmas Eve, I believe. Not to rhyme there, but I believe that was around the time when he decommitted. And it just seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of movement. I know he took that visit to Miami, and it was like, I mean, maybe he's changing his priority a little bit, because that's 3,300 miles away from Puyallup, Washington, where he's from, which is like less than an hour north of where I'm at. And so I'm really impressed with Dan Lanning and Adrian Clem, and the fact that they were able to bring him back for that last visit, and the fact that they won him over. And I'm not sure if Oregon was kind of the front runner for him. I would probably take an educated guess and say that he was probably bouncing around between different priorities with USC and Miami. I don't think USC got an official visit since he decommitted. I know we were talking about that before, but I didn't see anything about one. I think it was just Miami and Oregon, because of course he had the Polynesian Bowl as well in Hawaii. So maybe some of those, other recruits played a role, because there were a couple Oregon guys that were at the Polynesian Bowl. Ben Roberts and Kawika Rogers were out there. And so maybe that helped play a role a little bit. And of course, being as close as possible to home, I think that was great. But he talked so highly of the coaching staff. When I was talking about it in the last stream, that's kind of something I forgot about, was just, the effort that this coaching staff could make to get him back. Because it just didn't seem like we knew anything about that effort. And it was definitely there. It's worth mentioning.
Yeah, no doubt. I would venture to say that visit really sealed the deal for Iuli, and he becomes the crown jewel of the Oregon offensive line hall, which now also includes Michael Wooten and Kavika Rogers. And the Ducks still have the possibility and the chance to add Josh Connerly, a 5-star offensive lineman out of Rainier Beach in the Seattle area. So we can talk a little bit about him as we make our way through the comments here and the questions. Steve says, I think the play. Oh, no, that wasn't the one I was looking for. Sorry. It was this one. I hope Lanning and his assistant coaches attend games at Matthew Knight Arena and meets at Hayward Field to get the full effect of the Oregon Ducks sports. That's a great point. I mean, you saw how crazy the fans went, when they saw him at the Oregon State game over the weekend. I had some of those pictures from our awesome photographer, Scott Bolt. Definitely go give him a follow if you guys are looking for more Oregon content. He does a lot of great work. But yeah, I mean, you see how energized the fans are, and they just, they're fanatics. They really are. Just they're crazy for their Oregon football and their Oregon sports. And I think that's only going to help, improve his standing in the relationship with, the Oregon community. And then as far as Hayward Field goes, this is kind of circles back to another point from today. Lenny was talking about signing, I think it was 9 guys that had track and field background. And, adding a lot of speed and just that versatility, especially on defense, is going to be really valuable. And that was another aspect, I think, of Oregon football being fun that kind of comes to mind that we were talking about earlier, Dylan, is having some of those guys maybe play both football and participate in track and field. But to Steve's point here, yeah, it's definitely, you got to get out there. I've never covered a meet or been to a meet at Hayward Field, unfortunately, but I run by it almost every day, just out on my runs. And then, the atmosphere at Matthew Knight is definitely something that you want to be a part of.
Yeah, I got to, just to talk about Hayward Field, I got to be outside of Hayward Field during one of those, I think it was the national championships, I believe, at Hayward Field over the summer in June. And yeah, I mean, it's an awesome atmosphere, and it's not just Ducks fans either. But of course, there was majority Ducks fans because it's right there. But the fact that they were able to come to the Matthew Knight Arena and go, for a rivalry game, I think was huge. And the fact that it was against a 3-14, 3-15 team, and they were able to pull that crowd of 10,700 plus was super impressive. I was trying to do the transcription story for that speech, and it was hard to hear over the crowd him talking. Sometimes it was so loud. So yeah, it's super exciting that they have some track athletes. I know specifically at wide receiver, I remember when Satania and Tataroa McMillan decommitted, it was like, you really want to see that those track guys at receiver, and they've got track athletes all over, especially in this class. And I think Dan Lanning was saying something about, I was fired up about this class, but Coach Robert Johnson, the track and field head coach at Oregon, he was fired up too. And he wouldn't go into who specifically who might go into track, but there are definitely a couple guys, maybe even Jalil Florence could be one of the headliners that you could see running track, because that's a fast, athletic dude as well.
Tons of speed coming in the secondary for the Ducks in this 2022 signing class. Jalil Florence, like you mentioned, Dylan. Also Jalil Tucker, the two guys out of Lincoln and San Diego. Kamari Terrell, another guy out of Texas in the secondary that is another track guy. So tons of guys that could certainly, potentially see some time on the track at Hayward Field. Next question coming from Stefan. Thanks for the question, Stefan. Now that signing day has passed, how much contact are they even allowed to have with guys who didn't commit, like Connerly and Boardingham? This is a good question, because those are definitely the two biggest names that I think are still on the Oregon's radar. It is a dead period, I believe, now that we've gotten through signing day. So as far as I know, I think that means no in-person contact. That we've saw the coaches going all over the country to visit guys at their schools. So I would think that it's really kind of virtual now. From what I can gather, I need to take a look at the recruiting calendar, but we saw how hard they hit their recruiting show virtually, right? When these guys got hired on their phones, on FaceTime, on social media and all that. But Boardingham's the guy to watch right now. When I last talked to him, it looks like a decision could be coming maybe Friday or even going into next week. And Oregon and Florida are really locked in a 50-50 battle, but I think the Ducks feel good about where they're at there.
Yeah, I can't speak too much to how much contact are allowed. I do know it's a dead period, so but I mean, you think about last year, there was JT Tuimoloau was a guy that didn't commit till a couple weeks before fall camp. You always have to think about there's some of those guys that just are trying to make sure that they've got the calculated decision. I know Connerly, I believe, is going to be committing in March, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it's nice that Boardingham is coming close to a decision. So I think it's going to be interesting that, they're still in the race with Connerly, even after getting Dave Iuli and recently getting Rogers at the offensive line. But that's, still one of the most talented guys, if not the most talented guy remaining in the 2022 class that's left uncommitted in Connerly. And Boardingham is just a freak athlete. So if they can get him over Florida, I know you said it's 50-50. So I can't put too much speculation to that, but if they can get him, that's a huge weapon.
Yeah, Ducks got the last visit for Boardingham there, so we already talked about how influential that can be in these guys' decisions, and getting close to being close to the family rather, and maybe playing closer to his native Los Angeles versus going all the way out to Gainesville. Van Nuys is actually where he's from. I'm not sure how close that is to Los Angeles. I don't want to be throwing people's hometowns out there incorrectly, but Southern California nonetheless. So definitely someone to keep an eye on there. And I know Connolly is going to be a priority for them as well. Last question for us here on this episode of the Ducks Just podcast comes from Nine Family Bryce. Current position needs after today. I think right now you definitely have to look at adding another offensive playmaker. I think particularly at the wide receiver spot, that's the one that really sticks out to me the most, and I think the one that a lot of fans are really surprised that they haven't made a move for or added anybody at that position. Boardingham's obviously a guy that could fit that need. But maybe, I don't know, like you talked about earlier, how, we talked about making those 3 graphics because those are the guys we kind of felt the best about Oregon's chances. But I thought they were maybe going to pull out a surprise and still get, kind of a splashy guy that people weren't expecting. So Chase Cota still hasn't made his announcement. Maybe that's another guy to keep an eye on. He's obviously an Oregon guy coming from South Medford. That's really kind of the main need that I think right now. Maybe another linebacker. I like kind of how they've shored up the depth in the secondary. Offensive line isn't a huge need. And then defensive line, they've maybe even overcompensated. I don't know. I feel like they have that was part of the reason I think the Riley addition surprised some folks. But those are the biggest ones. I'd say wide receiver and maybe a linebacker kind of for me.
Yeah, I think maybe it might still be nice to add an experienced running back. Maybe a bigger experienced running back, like we were talking about a little bit. I don't think it's probably at the top of their priority list, but there's a lot of youth in that running back room, so maybe it's something to keep in mind. I agree with the playmaker on offense. I think you can always add another receiver. I'm surprised that they're they haven't landed a experienced receiver via the portal, because we know that they were looking for one. Jacob Cowan got an offer. I'm sure Brennan Rice was in the conversation. So I'm sure that, maybe that's still somewhere that they're looking for. I feel like on defense, they're kind of set. If I had to say, maybe you add another guy on the defensive edge, like a true edge rusher. Really hard to find, really hard to ask for, but maybe that's something to try to consider, because it seems like a lot of the guys that, like I said earlier, that play on the edge, it just seems like they're, you can move them in the middle, you can move them on the outside, you can move them to linebacker. Like, it's hard to find true edge guys, but maybe that's something to look for as well. But I feel like at the prep ranks, I think Connerly and Boardingham are kind of the last couple that I know of. So maybe from here on out, it's probably through the transfer portal.
We'll have your latest recruiting updates as the Ducks kind of still wait for some decisions from a couple guys like Dylan and I have talked about. Before we get out of here, Dylan, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at DRK Sports News. I'm tweeting a lot of Oregon stuff, and my notifications have been going nuts. So go ahead and add to that if you would like. You can find my stuff at Ducks Digest. I'm sure Max will plug where you can find everything on Ducks Digest. And I'm also working with the Transfer Portal CFB. Find us at TPortal CFB on Twitter and transferportalcfb.com.
All right. Awesome stuff there from Dylan. If you guys want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter at the name right there on your screen at mtorresports. And then just also wanted to pass along a couple places you guys can find us. Only favor we ask of you is that you obviously subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss the next time that I go live with Dylan or Steven or any of our other guys at Ducks Digest. But also check out Ducks Digest forums. You see that on your screen there. We have a couple different categories for various topics, whether it's football recruiting. I drop some nuggets there for recruiting every now and then hoops as well. So we got it all there. We're really trying to build this community at Ducks Digest and here on the Ducks Just podcast. So ask that you guys check this out. It's free, and it's another way for us to connect. And, you can have some awesome conversations, some good Duck talk with fellow Oregon fans. And then just the last thing, I have to address Greg's comment here. I thought you were wearing a Beavers t-shirt. No, this is a San Francisco Giants shirt. I'm from the Bay Area, so I'm just repping my team. No cause for concern there. But yes, so just wrapping up the other platforms you guys can find us at. If you look over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're at Ducks Dish for all of those. And then if you go into my Twitter profile, you can find the free Ducks Digest newsletter. I try to send that out every day, so you guys are kept up to date on the latest in Oregon sports news. That was a bunch of stuff. We went well over an hour today, and we're trying to do more of these lives. I'll be back here on YouTube live tomorrow. Stay tuned for the details. big thanks to Dylan for all the tremendous work he's been doing and for coming on the pod today. And thank you to everybody here tuning in, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Appreciate you guys for supporting, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.